All right. Hello, health heads. Welcome and thank you for checking in to this dose of the Healthcare Uprising. I'm your producer in the back, Jeremy Carr, here with your host in the front row, Heather Pierce. So, why don't you tell them what's on our agenda for today, Heather?
Today, we're meeting with Vinay Patel. He is the CEO and founder of Mako Rx, which actually just recently partnered up with Proactive MD. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. But he has been a pharmacist in a lot of different pharmacy type roles for the last, I don't know, 2 decades or so, maybe longer. And he's a healthcare entrepreneur who has dedicated his career to transforming the traditional healthcare system. He is shaking trees and breaking things.
Yeah, breaking stuff.
He's a disruptor. So we're excited to have him come on and talk about what he is doing to shake things up in the pharmacy corner of the healthcare universe.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and talk about the merger of those companies too. So, without further ado, let's hear our conversation with Vinay Patel from Proactive MD and Mako Rx.
Hi, and welcome to Healthcare Uprising podcast. Today we have Vinay Patel, CEO and founder of Mako Rx, with us. Welcome to the show, Vinay.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Excited to have this
Yeah.
conversation with you, Heather.
Yeah. Yep. And we were just saying we're starting a new category of topical area around pharmacy on the Uprising. So I'm excited that you're going to be our kind of our catalyst here. So
There you go.
yeah. So
Awesome.
with
Launching the new ship, as it were.
it, yeah, exactly. That means we're growing.
Yeah.
So awesome. I love it. Thanks for being a part of it. So, Vinay, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, kind of, what brought you to this point and building Mako RX and all the other things that you have your hands in?
So, yeah, it's been a long and winding road. I'm a pharmacist by background and have been practicing as a pharmacist for the last 20 or so years. Have seen and worked in a variety of different areas. Uh, Everything from academia, teaching pharmacy students and medical residents and medical students, to working in health systems, working in pharmacies, hometown pharmacies, mail order pharmacies, chain pharmacies, and worked for the state for a little bit. Throughout all of this, we've seen the invisible hand of these pharmacy benefit companies and how they essentially mirroring what happens in the medical space with insurance companies and how they influence prescribers to pharmacists in the pharmacy benefits world, and how sometimes how they, what they can say to patients, how they care for them, and for pharmacies, how much money they make. Pharmacies don't get to set the price for these medicines. They actually get paid whatever the insurance company says that they'll get paid for a medication. Sometimes that's less than what they get to buy the drugs for, which is also another interesting, fun story. And so throughout all of this, we said, okay, we wanted to provide something in the marketplace that didn't exist at the time, a group of myself and some pharmacists. And so we said, let's do Cost Plus. Today, Cost Plus is well known because we have a celebrity with a megaphone that announces sort of every movement. Mark Cuban's Cost Plus drug company. Love what Mark Cuban's doing. I think we need more
Mm-hmm.
people like him disrupting in the space. But essentially, we focused on the employer space. So we said, we're going to go and talk to these employers that offer close to 60% of the healthcare that people around the country get access to healthcare through their employers. And we want to go talk to these employers and let them know that through their decisions, they are either hurting their local communities because of the healthcare vendors that they choose, healthcare partners that they choose for their health plan, or they can help their community. And we've established this cost plus relationship with local independent pharmacies, a network of about 20,000 pharmacies across the country, and now also includes grocer pharmacies. And you can do it in a way that helps your community and helps to uplift them and help reconnect your members away from mail order. They don't have to get their drugs in the mail. There's nothing special about that, to getting medications and having a relationship with a pharmacist in their community that can help them out, whether that's a retail pharmacist at one of the big box chain stores, or it's one of these mom and pop pharmacies. We want to make sure that people can get their medicines locally when they need them, so that there's no issues. And that was sort of, the impetus or the starting of focusing on the employer market with this cost plus network of pharmacies and really educating and helping to find savings for these employer groups that continually talk about how expensive drugs have gotten. And
Mhm.
then over the last 6 months or so, we've actually now merged with a new company called Proactive MD. They're an advanced primary care organization, and they set up primary care clinics exclusively for large employers across the country. Employers that manufacture, have manufacturing plants with thousands of employees. They now have their own very own primary care clinic right near
Oh, wow.
their workplace locations. And now we've embedded a virtual pharmacist here to help support the members of those clinics and the staff and the providers at those clinics to help enhance the care that they provide education, support, better health outcomes, and then of course access to savings programs that we've built for employers as well. So that's a little bit of everything. I apologize, I rambled on a little
No,
bit
that's
too long,
great. That's a
but
great setup.
I have a few things I want to ask about right there, actually.
Jump right in, Jeremy.
How extensive are the services at those company store kind of clinics you're starting there? Like how much care can they actually get at those things?
great question, Jeremy. So this is a full service primary care clinic on site for these employer groups. So they can get essentially all you can eat primary care. It's most of the times it's no cost to the members. It's being funded by 100% by the employer. They own the building. They own all the stuff inside the building. It's really this provider network or provider group that's staffing that they're paying for. And that's again all a fixed bundle cost for the month. So it's typically no cost to the employee. They can see their provider as many times as they want. In fact, we encourage them to see their primary care as often as they need to establish a really strong relationship of primary care. They can get blood work done at the clinic. They can get vaccines done at the clinic as well. And other ancillary services sometimes are offered like PT and OT and so on and so forth, depending on what the employer wants to offer. And then, of course, there's an entire now pharmacy team that's supporting them to help consult and provide consultative services to these members as well, in addition to everything that they get. They really just don't get emergency services and they don't get specialty services through these clinics, but everything else they can pretty much get right there at that clinic. And for
That's
them
pretty
and for
brilliant.
their family and dependents.
Yeah, this makes me think of Humana does this for
Mhm.
Medicare. They create
Mhm.
like, yeah, they're kind of like inclusive, all self-inclusive, I don't know if that's the right word, facilities
Mhm.
that if you're a Humana member, is it kind of similar
That's exactly
to that
right for the
operating model?
employer.
Okay,
Yep, that's right. That's right.
got it. Got it. Actually,
And
Jeremy, we have one here in Flagstaff too. I think it's called
do we?
Vera Health or
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
uh
On
That's
Gore.
right.
up on Cedar.
Yep, Gore, which is a big employer here in the Flagstaff area, one of the few big employers, which is like very manufacturing heavy.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They have a similar,
Oh, so that's what Vera Health is.
it
It's
is
actually Gore's personal clinic, basically.
not just Gore, but yeah, it certainly does serve the Gore population. So is that kind of
Ah,
the,
okay.
would that be kind of the similar space then?
Yeah, that's right. So when it's attached to an employer, it's a dedicated site. And so that's just an on-site employer clinic. When it's a shared site, so they're in the community, similar to what you were just talking about with Vera, many different employers can get in on the same clinic and provide those services to employees that may not be enough to support with just one employer if they're too small. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Both.
it gives those employees more access, and it also lightens the load on the general healthcare system in the area too, I would think, right? I mean, a new clinic's a new clinic. It helps take up the case.
That's right. That's right. And access isn't an issue. There's no waiting weeks to see a doctor, when it's your
Mm.
primary care doctor. And there's a much stronger relationship because they're not seeing these patients in 5 to 7 minute visits. They're actually spending 15, 20, 30 minutes or more with the patient to make sure that they really understand what's going on and help treat all their conditions that they have going on.
So there's the relationship with Proactive MD, there's
Mhm.
Mako. So
Mhm.
do you have kind of like two maybe two avenues so where you work
Mhm.
with them but then you also exist as Mako going directly to the employers and delivering what so you're not a PBM, right?
That's right. We're not a
You
PBM.
PBM.
a PBM, sorry, for Pharmacy Benefit Management Company for our
Okay.
non-industry folks. So we like to spell out our acronyms on the show as
Yeah.
well.
Great idea. Great
Because
idea.
I need to know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. The joke in healthcare and probably any industry, it's like, let's see how far we can talk in acronyms before we run
That's
out of
right.
options. Um, so you're not a PBM by design, but
That's
you're
right.
really trying to solve the issue of cost, access, patient care. I mean, the role of pharmacists has been changing. I think
Mhm.
maybe can still change. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit more about like really what is Mako trying to do? How's Mako changing its little corner of the world here?
Yeah. A couple different areas. One is focused on working with employers to provide access to affordable medications. And that is executed a couple different ways. One is by embedding a pharmacist, if they have an on-site clinic or near-site clinic, to really help their members achieve better health outcomes for their chronic care conditions that they have, enhance the care that they already provide through education and knowledge and information about drugs and the use for drugs and how, what other alternatives are there for the treatments that they need, cost effective and otherwise help support the clinicians as well through more drug information, knowledge and access and consultative services for really complex patients and high cost patients. And so find savings and help improve health outcomes for the members at these clinics through embedded virtual pharmacy services. And then we also have savings programs. So we built savings programs for employers to help them access drug saving programs that will help to provide affordable medications when the health plan only gives you an option for the $10,000 drug that happens to be available in a biosimilar or generic now, we can then go outside the health plan and directly get that employer and that member access to a drug that's a tenth of the cost, a 20th of the cost sometimes, going directly to these sources that can give them access to the lowest cost treatments, helping the health plan save money and keeping healthcare affordable for everyone and making sure the members have access to no cost options. So they don't have anything out of pocket when they utilize and access the savings programs that we've built. And then being consultative to the employer and helping them understand, what is your pharmacy benefit contract supposed to look like? Where are the loopholes? Where are the conflict of interest that they have between pharmacy and your healthcare consultant? Where can we optimize the plan? What are other areas we can help you understand pharmacy better and help you find creative solutions around pharmacy, like, buy and bill drugs, infusion and IV medications that you can help, navigate patients to better cost of care. And so this is sort of the kit and caboodle of what we do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Having worked on the employer, kind of the commercial health plan side of the healthcare industry, I was thinking about like how Mako would show up, right, in terms of delivering, being one piece of kind of the full benefits package that an employer could offer to their people. And so you would really, whereas typically a PBM comes in as part of a contract with a health plan, like an
Hmm.
Express Scripts or a CVS pharmacy or what have you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mako's different in that you're showing up by yourself like to essentially be brought on as a contractor or a vendor
Hmm.
separate from that. Is that a
That's
correct
correct.
statement?
That's right. Yeah, that's correct. Either
Got it.
within a primary care, on-site clinic with Proactive MD, or outside of that, just to be contracted to provide drug saving programs and maybe chronic care management for their members, so on and so forth. But that's exactly right.
And I imagine too, as you look at certain industries, you're going to see where like manufacturing versus, I don't know, like a white collar kind of sit at the desk engineering firm sort of situation. They're going to have different health conditions that
Absolutely.
are higher in one industry over another. And then also in turn, the pharmaceuticals line up to that as well. So you probably
Hmm.
start seeing where, you've got a higher propensity of your people to have, I don't know, musculoskeletal issues because they're
Hmm.
on their feet all day doing merchandising or retail or whatever, versus
Hmm.
maybe more solitary people that might have more mental health or depression issues. And do you look at it from that perspective and can you build programs for specific
Absolutely.
employers?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The chronic conditions that we see, does have different prevalences in different industries. You're absolutely right. And they're going to require different treatments depending on the type of work that they're doing. And we definitely see different severity of these chronic conditions and depending on the populations. In certain manufacturing plants, we have a socioeconomic spectrum of people that are more international folks, folks that are not English may not be their first language, or they may be more minority classes represented in a manufacturing plant versus again, like you said, industries that have more entry level white collar work or retail work or hospitality work, where you have younger populations and different needs and absolutely, yeah, we've seen that spectrum across the board. The one thing that we've noticed across all the industries is that 1 to 3% of the population is likely to be on a specialty medication. And those are the highest cost drugs now. They're the most advertised medications. If you've seen an ad on TV, it was likely for a specialty medication. And they're getting more and more expensive. And so that portion of the population is driving, 60% of the cost of the pharmacy and healthcare spend now. And so pharmacies become a hot topic. Before it was just, oh, pharmacy is 20%. No one really cares. Now you lead with pharmacy because everyone has this problem with spend around pharmacy and they want to know what to do about it and what kind of ideas are there. So now it's more of a hot topic.
That actually brings me back around to one of the other questions I had. Uh, that I want to talk turkey on the cost plus thing. And,
Mhm.
I know it gives like got the general aspect of it gets more access and a lower price for pharmaceuticals for
Mhm.
people. But how much are they really saving and how does that work? Like how can you explain the process of how you actually lower those prices and how low they actually get and what, the difference people can actually see from that?
Yeah. So it's a multifaceted approach. Cost Plus is just a nice core engine that we build off of. So this is just a transparent way to understand how every single drug is priced in the healthcare system. So today you could get a drug for that's a penny, and we'll tell you that's a penny drug, and they got 30 pills of that, so it's 30 cents. And that's just what the pharmacy's buying the drug for. Or it's a dollar drug, or it's a $10 drug, or it's $1,000 or $10,000 drug. But now you get to see clearly, without any obfuscation, without any other manipulations in price, exactly what the pharmacy's buying that drug for. And then that's the cost that you pay the pharmacy to buy the drug for. And then you have a dispense fee or the margin that the pharmacy makes to get that drug to your members. And now you see clearly, just crystal clear, we don't put that cost basis on. We use a national average drug purchase price that the pharmacies are buying this for, national average price that the pharmacies are buying it for. So we use that as the cost basis, not tied to us. We don't set it. It's actually maintained by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services through surveys that they do across the pharmacies across the country. And we use that as our cost basis. And now you as the employer, Jeremy, get to see what these drugs are costing you. And that's when then we get to ask the questions, what would you like to do about it? Here's how much you're spending. Do you know how much value you get or how much return you're getting for how much you spend on these drugs? I can tell you that there's no sense in talking about how to get the drug cost lower and lower because there is a floor to this price. And if we keep going down too low, we're going to start hurting more and more pharmacies where we're only going to have 2 or 3 options available. So if this is how much you have to spend on these drugs, here's a couple of tools available to you to help you lower that cost of drugs. So here's alternatives that members could be taking that are biosimilar or generic medicines that would cost the plan even less. We can optimize the formulary so that you can get access to those drugs. Here are some savings programs that you could plug into. There's certain programs available in the country that can purchase these drugs or can acquire these drugs for much lower cost than the standard pharmacy can buy them for. There's specialized programs, there's specialized way to access those programs, but we can introduce you to those. You can purchase those drugs, you can have individual members purchase those drugs internationally, and they'll be either half the price or greater in savings when you purchase those drugs internationally. If you're comfortable with that, if you want your members to access those programs, we can show you how to access those programs. And then so on and so forth. We have this tool set to help members find savings and help to the health plan afford their medications. But the cost plus is just the engine. That's sort of the basis to understand exactly how much you're spending without all the obfuscation and black box that pharmacy represents.
Brilliant. Thank you.
There you go.
I understand much better now.
Well, actually, and that helped me too because, admittedly, although I've been in the healthcare industry for a long time, the area of pharmacy is where I spent the least amount of time. So I still have a lot to learn too, and it's changed so much over the
Mhm.
last, I want to say, what, 20 or so years that I've
Yeah.
been in this. And then you have to think about it too. And I wanted to make it a comment about Medicare, Medicaid,
Yeah.
employer plans, the differences from one employer to another, what they're willing to cover. It's not apples and oranges, you know, or it is apples and oranges. I guess apple, oranges, pineapples, apples, grapes, strawberries. I mean, it's different depending on your employer. You know, we talk like, state benefits, for example, really rich benefits. They cover a lot more than, say, like I don't know, just some other company. So it's hard to do those direct comparisons. But you mentioned CMS, or Center for Medicare and Medicaid.
That's right.
Hello.
Yeah.
I said it right. But CMS, I think people forget that they actually drive a lot of the costs, like across the board. It's not just Medicare, right? And so that, can you maybe explain that a little bit, or like what that means? And I might even have that wrong. So where CMS comes into play.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're asking. So when you say explain what CMS does, you're saying how CMS can help set prices?
Setting prices, exactly. And how does that affect everybody? Does it just, affect
So
one group?
you hit on a couple things there, and we can circle back on. I want to get back to apples, oranges, strawberries,
Also that.
in terms of drug pricing, right? We can talk about that, but to get back to your point, so we know Medicare as a benchmark. We talk about this benchmark when we talk about reference-based pricing in health
Mhm.
plans today. And we say, okay, well, how much above Medicare are you really paying? And we find that health systems sometimes charge 3, 4, 5, 600% of Medicare for these services because what we hear, and all I know is what I understand from the health systems, is that they need to get more money from commercial plans, so that they can subsidize the care they're essentially giving away from Medicare because 100% of Medicare is still not enough for them to maintain what it costs for that service. Although when you ask, you really can't get a good sense of what any service costs because no one's keeping track of cost accounting in healthcare. And so this is the disparity, and we know that Medicare sets a benchmark that we can measure off of. The same thing happens in pharmacy. CMS establishes the benchmark price for a drug. This is the average price that pharmacies pay for these medications before rebates. There's just the standard cost, the invoice prices pharmacies are paying for these drugs, so that we can then set a benchmark to say, if you, just as you could set a benchmark on the medical claim side against Medicare, you can set your benchmark against the what's called NADAC, NADAC, National Average Drug Acquisition Cost, that's set by CMS and it's updated every week, monthly for the big update. And so you can see this drug that I'm taking, that we have a great example. Dimethyl fumarate, which is the generic for Tecfidera, is a multiple sclerosis drug. It's a generic medication that is originally a specialty medicine, one of these older generation specialty medicines that still came in a tablet. And this was the new frontier for pharma when they were coming out with specialty medications. It was an expensive drug, $10,000, $12,000 a month you'd have to purchase and take Tecfidera for. Once it went generic, the cost of this drug at a local pharmacy, tell me if you could even guess how much dimethyl fumarate, the generic of Tecfidera, would be at a local
Oh
pharmacy.
boy.
This is like The Price is Right. Who's gonna win? $100.
$100, Heather. Jeremy?
I'm gonna totally lowball it. I'm gonna say $10.
So you guys were you were right there if you combine those two. So $50 is what a
Oh,
local pharmacy
Wow.
would sell this drug for. We've seen prescription claims go through employer health plans where the patient's getting the generic medication through a specialty pharmacy or a mail order pharmacy, and the health plan's getting charged $5,000, sometimes $10,000 still a month for the generic. And this is where there's a lot of overpayment. You talk about this benchmark. Now you
wow.
can see if you just get your data, again, just sort of principles of healthcare for employers. know what your costs are, so get your data, demand it so that you have access to it, and then find an expert that can help tell you what that data means. Because there's typically about 1.7 to 2.3% of claims where there's this hidden cost in there that you really shouldn't be paying, and you can find that out by measuring it against benchmarks like this.
That
Does
that's
that
a
help answer what you were
it
talking about?
goes drops from $10,000 to $50. Like that's crazy.
And the
It's crazy.
it absolutely is crazy. And part of that is the insurance companies or the pharmacy benefit companies are still labeling that as a specialty medication. And because it's a specialty medicine, it's priced differently to the employer. But they know exactly what the pharmacies are buying this drug for. In fact, some of these pharmacies, they own them. They own these specialty or mail order pharmacies. So they know exactly what they're buying these drugs for. And it's really just an overcharge that,
Hmm,
people don't see hidden in the system.
Wow.
that's crazy.
And you said only 1 to 3% of people take all those drugs that they advertise on TV all the time?
The number of patients on any given plan that's on specialty medicines, yeah, typically about 1 to 3%. But these are so
Wow.
expensive that they represent 60% of the pharmacy spend.
Hmm.
Wow. And that's what justifies the cost to do all that advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
I have a friend
It's worse than I thought.
who works in the specialty injectables business, and I always get good insider information from him about what's happening. It's actually interesting that part of, at least from what he's told me, and I'm sure you know, like in terms of the kind of the pharmaceutical industry itself is more like it's more like the tech world in terms of like they build something really quickly and then they kind of sell the company off or it gets acquired once it goes and hits market. So like a lot of people in that area, they tend to jump around to like the next company that's building the next specialty drug. Is that a good assessment? My my layman's version of it.
And I've heard that before. I'm not too intimately familiar with that
Oh, okay.
space. I'm not, in the biotech space or know a lot of startups.
Biotech. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but I
Yeah.
but I have heard that before.
Yeah.
That you want to get acquired by one of these big companies because
Right.
they're the ones who can market your drug and get you access to the patients, once you've created the treatment. So they spend all this time either in
Yeah.
universities or private labs figuring out the right molecule and the combination, and then
Mhm.
to get it to market, you got to get bought out to
Yeah.
essentially scale it.
Hmm.
It's interesting. Yeah. Again, I pharmacy is probably the one area I know the least about. So this is actually really insightful for me. I'm learning quite a lot just talking to you today and asking all these good questions. But one of the things too that I wanted to touch on, when we I don't know, I feel like pharmaceuticals is has a bad rap, right? Like a lot of people don't feel great about it. Like it costs you, and it's cost, right? Like so much of it is cost, and we hear about folks that are with diabetes, right, and getting their insulin and the cost of insulin, and
Mhm.
people are rationing because of the cost. Like, oh, for anyone to ration needed medication to stay alive is like that's scary and sad and like why why is it like this? um, what do you like? What is the hardest part about being in the pharmaceutical? When I say pharmaceutical business, I mean in terms of like delivering care, access. Is it just cost? Is it other things? I mean, I know I asked about like the role of the pharmacist changing. It's almost like they can step in to help an already burdened system of care delivery. I don't know. I'd like to explore that a little bit and get your perspective.
Healthcare is hard. Healthcare has only
Mhm.
gotten harder over the last 30 years. And I'd say the core principle that we can point to is it's getting harder because by design or intentionally, it's gotten more complex. And in my personal opinion, unnecessarily complex, but it's gotten just harder and harder for three different things. One is accessing care, the other is the quality of care, and the third being the cost of care. So these three things, because healthcare has gotten more complex, all three of these things have gone in the wrong direction. It's harder, it takes longer to access care, and then cost, it's more expensive because it's of increased complexity. There's more hands to have to touch every patient, to get every medication to a patient, so on and so forth. And a lot of that, and then the quality of care because you just don't have enough time has gone down. And that's as a provider. And providers, there's a tremendous amount of burnout. There's a tremendous amount of self blame, again, just unneeded. because they can't help. Well, a lot of the healthcare practitioners got into this field because they just wanted to help people, and they just don't. The system doesn't allow them to. Whether that, whatever that system is, it's a big machine, but that's health insurance and that's health systems and that's a lot of different moving parts that because they don't have enough time and the support and the infrastructure to help take care of patients the best way that they know how to, and they're sort of beat down by trying to do what they think is right and best for their patients, that they essentially resort to seeing patients just every couple of minutes to pump out as much as possible. Now the system rewards volume. They know that there's $8.73 to be made for every patient. So you need to see 100 patients so that we can maintain, the revenues that we have as a health system or as a health insurance provider. And there's many different proponents of how we need to change the system, and it's going to be really hard and crazy to change it. But it should start with some simplification. And in pharmacy, what that means is, we talked about we know the cost of drugs before there's rebates. Rebates are the one sort of toxic trade in pharmacy that is incentivizing more expensive drugs. We talked about insulin. There was a group of insulins that went generic in 2021, and most health plans at the time didn't offer generic insulins as part of their formulary because the rebates made it so that the cost of that insulin was cheaper after the rebate for the brand than the generic, which didn't have any rebates and was just sort of upfront pricing for that medicine. Well, what that meant was when patients went to go get that medicine at the pharmacy, they were having to pay the higher cost of the brand insulin rather than the lower cost they could have paid for the generic insulin because there's rebates involved. And that's just, one example of why the system is incentivizing more expensive drugs that really are coming out now that are hundreds of thousands of dollars for a treatment course because these pharmaceutical companies have to pay rebates back to the insurance companies to get access to the patients that they need for market share. And so all of this is just, again, the big ball of wax. But in our little world, if I could do one thing to change the system, it's get rid of rebates. And it would only take a couple of lines of legislation. It wouldn't even be an extensive piece of legislation. They would have to eliminate rebates from the Safe Harbor Act. And now we have a system that just favors a competition to lower drug prices instead of incentivizing to higher drug prices.
Well, because healthcare, we say this a lot. Healthcare is human care, right? And doctors want a doctor, and the system that you're talking about doesn't allow them to do that. What you're describing does not serve patients
That's right.
ultimately at the end, and certainly doesn't serve the doctors either who want to provide the right course of care.
That's
The system shouldn't be dictating those things. And that is what is happening, unfortunately.
The tail's wagging the dog at this point.
Yeah, exactly. There's a good way to say it. But
Yeah.
legislation, is anything happening in that space around rebates? Are you involved in any kind of I don't know, work towards that you can
I
share?
personally am not involved. I see a lot of what's going on. Over the years, over the last at least 5 to 6 years, there's been a lot more discussion about it. There's a lot more awareness about it. Every time, it seems like every 4 years when we have a presidential election, healthcare becomes the top topic that everyone wants to get changed. Senators and House reps have brought legislation forward to help change some of these things. There's just a lot of money. There's a lot of power and influence at the federal level where a lot of these things just don't get changed. We had some interesting PBM reform that was going through at the end of December last year before the administration changed. But all of that got killed because of a tweet that said, this bill is too big. We need to simplify it. And then it just never resurfaced again.
Mm.
It's actually there's a little piece of PBM reform in the newest piece of legislation going through around the budget. But nonetheless, I'm personally not involved, but where there is a lot of activity and where we've seen more traction in reform for PBM is at the state level. If you want to look at an example of a state that just seems to be really aggressive against PBMs, Arkansas has been leading the forefront for the
Really?
last 20, 25 years. They have a very strong pharmacy coalition there. They
Mm.
have legislators and a governor that understands why there needs to be reform and really are able to stand up to them and not take the pressure that comes from, all of these
Mm.
industry middlemen that push back on it. And a lot of states have created PBM reform. Arkansas is just leading the change, but there's been plenty of states now, Ohio, Tennessee, a lot of Medicaid reform around getting rid of what's called managed care organizations or privatized companies to manage Medicaid in all
Hmm.
of these states because they found after they did the data analyses that there was so much money that they were being overcharged that if they just went back to the state managing it, it'd be a much better. If they picked one instead of multiple, they could have much better. And then they just set the parameters and they say, okay, private companies, you got to execute it this way. So yeah,
Interesting.
lots of change, lots of change happening, lots of discussions. I don't know if
Yeah.
anything will happen at the federal level. Not too, super hopeful, but holding my breath for it. And then at the state levels, there's been quite a bit of reform.
I like that they're showing that healthcare is much more efficient when it's run by a single office on the government level.
Mm.
That's an interesting point.
Right. This is true. Yeah, having worked in Medicaid and Medicare through a lot of my career, I have some thoughts that I will not delve into today. But yeah, I've definitely seen it work and not work. So, but yeah, the pharmaceutical piece is interesting though because I think it's just become a larger piece of kind of our healthcare benefits. And so
Yeah.
where there's a lot of cost, as you were kind of talking about. Um, so I want to talk a little bit more about what Mako's doing in this space. What you're solving for, right? Like this didn't just come out of thin air. Obviously, we've been talking about a lot of the problems, a lot of the challenges in kind of the overall healthcare space, pharmacy being a part of that. So obviously you're addressing it from some innovation, right? You're a disruptor, 100%. We like disruptors. That's why you're here. We like to bring all the disruptors on the show. Um, but like, what are you seeing in terms of all the relationships in any contracts that you have had, like so far being in this business? What are kind of the good outcomes that you're starting to see? Are you seeing any trends by doing it differently, by doing it the way that you're approaching things?
Yeah, this goes back to a question that I now remember Jeremy is asking is, what can employers save when they switch over to a model like ours? And we've seen that without doing a lot of differences, just going through the cost plus transparency and having these value conversations, groups typically save 25 to 31% on their pharmacy benefits. Just switching over to away from the heavily, high cost drug formulators to a net cost formulary and implementing this cost plus system. Again, there's significant savings for employers to have. And again, our niche is focusing on employers. We've seen thousands of patients that we've talked to over the course of since we started 7 years ago, where we'll go in and explain to the members, we're here to tell you that you can go get your health care and your pharmacy locally. Just pharmacy, forget healthcare. You can get your pharmacy, your medicines locally. And most of the times what we hear from, again, thousands of folks is, wow, I didn't know that there was a local pharmacy in my area. I thought I had to get my drugs through the mail order. And now that I have a relationship with a pharmacist, it's not just that I can save money by going to see that pharmacist, but they know who I am. They know my conditions. They're usually there. They usually have the time to help problem solve if I have issues with my medication versus, the time, they just don't have the time at the big box stores. And so now we are having them establish relationships in that and just the value of that in helping to guide people to get their pharmacy care, their health care locally has been a tremendous amount of just uplift. We have access to, because we have this cost plus transparency, we can ask employers if they're willing to pay for the lowest cost drugs without giving any cost share to their members. And so there's a list of now over 300 medicines we can offer at no cost to their members when they go into one of our preferred cost plus pharmacies. And that's again, locally, they can access no cost drugs. And every time we talk to patients, they're like, man, I love this, that I can access some of these drugs that I take for free when it was costing me, 30, 40, $50 before a month for my medicines. I actually get to save on my healthcare costs. And not only that, but they're helping their employer save, which many people don't get to see the real cost of these drugs when their cost share is so little. Even if they have a high deductible plan, eventually it goes to zero. There's manufacturer cost saving programs that lower their cost, and they don't get to see how expensive these drugs are, where they can save, or where they're over, they're creating more costs for some of the drugs that they take. And so just all around, we've been able to help people access drugs they weren't able to get before and help them navigate the system better. We have a whole customer support team that reaches out to folks, and folks can reach out to them and say, I have a problem with my medicines. Okay, great. Let me tell you what's wrong, what you need to do. We're going to talk to your doctor's office. We'll talk to your pharmacy. We'll tell them about their options and alternatives that they have, or we'll help you hold your hand through navigating the whole process. It's not just wait, a week to hear back from an insurance company. It's really someone who knows the pharmacy system can help navigate it for you, and that's been super powerful as well from those folks. People that have questions about why do I take this, what are some alternatives that I've personally spoken to, have been very fulfilling as well. So lots of soft benefits, definitely some hard tangible benefits that we've seen, and just it's hard though. The system is really entrenched. It's really hard to get them to pull away from to get employers to decide differently, because that's really what's going to move the needle is when we get more and more employers that decide to do healthcare differently because they're paying for their own healthcare costs and choosing different vendors and holding them accountable or holding them to better pricing is when we're really going to see the needle really move. So we've touched the surface. We just barely nicked the surface of this iceberg that lives underwater, and we've started to see just in our tiny world some really good benefits and highlights, but it's going to take a lot more employers deciding to do things differently to really change the entire system.
That volume that you need, right? That
Yeah,
kind of like
exactly.
behavior change. I think
That's
we
right.
talk a lot about
Exactly.
that on the show is behavior change.
Like
And
a real cultural shift to
yep,
the whole
That's right.
thing.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Wow. Funny, I looked up locations while on your website for here in Flagstaff, and ironically, there's two on here I've never heard of pharmacies.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
What are they called?
Flagstaff Pharmacy
Uh-huh.
and Wadham's Apothecary. And I was also thinking too, like the
Huh.
apothecary,
Hmm.
we have like compounding pharmacies.
Yeah.
I've gotten some from one here in town, one in Colorado for something
Oh,
having to
great.
do with perimenopause.
Yeah.
Also drop that
Okay.
one a lot in the show. But yeah, that's the other thing too. Compounding pharmacies has
Mhm.
been a term that I feel like I don't know if it's just because I'm having more issues as I'm getting older and needing something, or have they always been around, or are they growing in popularity? And that was
Mhm.
another question I wanted to ask you too, is kind of like the mom and pop pharmacies, right? Like they kind of disappeared, much like, or not completely disappeared, but they've definitely they don't exist as much as they used to, much like the independent PCP doesn't, right? Because they've kind of been gobbled up by these like health systems or what have you. Are are we looking to make a comeback like with these individual pharmacy types and things of that nature, or what's changing?
So some context. You're there. It is a real struggle for mom and pop pharmacies to survive today more than ever, and it's only gotten harder over the last 15 years to survive as an independent mom and pop pharmacies. If you follow pharmacy news or healthcare news, you know that you've probably seen some really well-known established pharmacies that have been around for decades, over 50 years, just say, look, we can't afford to keep our doors open because of how bad it's gotten with insurance companies and their reimbursements primarily, and then all of the other sort of barriers that exist in being able to provide care. However, with that said, a third of all pharmacies in the country are still independent mom and pop pharmacies. We have 66,000 pharmacies in the country. About 20 to 22,000 pharmacies are mom and pop, pharmacies. They're more prevalent in rural areas and suburban areas than they are in urban areas. But they do exist, and they're just, again, holding on by a thread. And so we're at a crossroads. They're not making a comeback yet. About as many new starts as there are closures, and so it's keeping that number about relatively the same from year to year. But but if we don't decide to do things differently, either from a federal or state level, to really enforce some fairness, really is what the pharmacies are asking for in how they're treated versus some of these retail chains or insurance companies that own pharmacies, then we're going to start seeing a lot more pharmacies close, and we'll only have, basically two or three healthcare options in terms of pharmacy, in the near term. Or we can decide, that as a country want to shift and really help support and focus on supporting small businesses across the board. There's, again, monopoly power in every different sector of our economy. It's not just healthcare, and decide to support the small businesses, and then we can see that flourish again, and really have a lot of competition. And that's not on just cost, but it's on care, service and care and quality of care. And we can really see those things improve with more competition personally.
Yeah. And I think, that's especially in rural areas, which I wanted to talk about that a little bit too. But the difference between rural versus urban, access to pharmaceuticals, use of mail order, the value, or probably the overwhelming value of a mom and pop place in a rural, right? It's a different kind, different people, right? It's like it's a
Mhm.
different community, and so people want to access things differently. And as the population gets younger, right, and more tech
Mhm.
savvy, like what does that
Mhm.
look like? How do we deliver? But I almost feel like too, to a certain degree, is that we've been so we've lived on our phones and we've become so reliant on technology, and I love it, trust me, like all day long give me the chat GPT. But I love human interaction, right? And I don't know if that's an age thing. I don't know. Ask a 30-year-old. I'm almost 50. So, you know, we've been around the block for a while, and I'm like, more than
Yes. Us
ever.
Gen Xers are very visceral.
We are, right? Yeah, we'll scream it from, we don't care who's listening. We're still going to say it. But like, right? But like I want that human connection, right? So I don't know. Like the idea of having a tight-knit relationship with my local pharmacist sounds dreamy. Is it just
And
me?
here's an example, right? We saw, so 2020 comes, COVID hits, and for the next 2 to 3 years, you have this health tech boom because a lot of the regulations were relaxed. And we thought the future is virtual care. Virtual is going to replace everything. We're never going to have to go back and see a doctor again. And a ton of money flowed to all these health tech startups that were doing virtual care. There was plenty of bad actors that sort of took advantage of the system and the way that the lax rules that were there around that, at the time. But now you come into late 24 or 24 and 25, all those regulations get put back. And as Warren Buffett would say, is that you can see the companies that aren't swimming with any clothes on once the tide goes back to the ocean. And yet now you start seeing all these health tech companies, just sort of falling apart, closing shop, scandal ridden, so on and so forth. And I think this highlights your point, Heather, which is healthcare will always be personal. Healthcare should always have an in-person component. It'll never go away. We may get to a hybrid state, but it seems like more and more people want to go in and see their doctor. They want to go be seen in person more than just the virtual care. And I think that speaks to, healthcare will always be local and personal to some extent.
Yeah. And it seems like what you're doing with Proactive MD kind of fits that
Hmm.
vision,
Yeah,
right? That
that's
fits
right.
that delivery of care that I think people really are yearning for.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Even virtual care is great, right? Like I use virtual care and it's amazing. Um, and I still feel like I'm getting that personal level of support. But I also love seeing my doctor in person. I
Hmm.
also like knowing if I go into the pharmacy, especially if you have like multiple medications that you're taking. I don't really have anything like that, but I can imagine if I was in that situation, having that relationship would be really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because when
So,
someone knows you really well, they can help. Something could come up and they're like, okay, I know how to help you, or I know
mhm.
what's going on. I know you and your family. You've been here for a couple of years. Same thing with a provider. If you have a relationship with a pharmacy, they can help you that much better if they have a relationship with you.
Yeah.
We've had that same talk on here on other episodes about your PCP, your primary care provider, like
Hmm.
how you should have one
Hmm.
and and have them know who you are,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
that when you need
Yeah,
something, you can get it.
that's right.
No, yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why a pharmacy shouldn't be the same way.
Yeah.
I have a question for you too, as we kind of start to wrap things up here. Um, One of the things we had mentioned, or you had mentioned earlier in our conversation, was around the volume, kind of volume of care being
Hmm.
incentivized. You know, that $8.73. So I'm going to see 100 patients per week. We talk a lot about value-based care on this show. I actually worked in value-based care when it was kind of a novel idea. It was a brand new concept. Was actually teaching people internally in in Aetna that I worked for at the time about what it meant, and it was like very based in like ACOs, joint ventures, accountable care organizations. A lot of our tech companies today talk about value-based care. Would you say that Mako would, do you align with value-based care? Do you see yourself as being a part of that? Do you think it's something different? Is it just I'm a disruptor and I'm shaking the tree and showing what's broken, or is it a little bit of both?
We 100% see the future as value-based care. I think that we've tried to do that. I mean, value-based care came to my awareness with the Affordable Care Act, and they tried to do it in the 2010s, and it sort of went away and withered. But in the employer market, I really think that there is a perfect confluence of factors to talk about value-based care. We talked about a little bit about what the value is for medications. And there's and absolutely, as the drug gets more and more expensive, you should be having those conversations of what do you expect out of this treatment? Are we supporting the member to optimize the treatment goals for this? Are they adherent to the medicine? Are there any side effects? Are there any genetic factors? All of this, as the drug gets more and more expensive, are super important to talk to an employer about it. What do you want to accomplish with your healthcare plan? Is it just bottom dollar, or do you want, to provide some additional benefit? Are you here to help to, take care of your population over the years, or is there too much turnover? So on and so forth. That definitely exists in pharmacy. There's more manufacturers getting into value-based care. They want to support the therapies that they're bringing to market with a contract that shows that, you're going to pay X amount of dollars. We should get more if we're helping people cure or become stabilized on their conditions. And there's more and more of those contracts on the specialty side from pharma. On the healthcare side, we're 100% aligned with Proactive MD going to a value-based care model. We see that as the future. We know that that's coming, and it just provides that much more alignment, both fiduciary and from a clinical perspective, taking care of their members to say, here's what we need to do. I think that just holding one piece of the puzzle to that for primary care may not give you access to everything. We want to get to a place where we can go to total cost of care and talk about value-based care in that terms, in that lens. And in healthcare, it's not, you typically think about, if I do this intervention and I see this outcome, it should be tied back to the person or the thing or the entity that did that intervention. But in fact, in healthcare, you're probably influenced a lot more about how your health is outside of a doctor's office visit than you are within, when you only get to see your doctor, three, maybe four times a year, for your primary care stuff. And there's specialists, and there's, all the social determinants of health factors that come into play as well that support that. And so there needs to be just a different mentality on how we think about value-based care, instead of just a intervention and then here's the outcome and then here's the savings, in terms of how's the system aligned, everyone in the system aligned to provide the best care at the lowest price, or the most affordable price, to get that return.
Yeah, that very well said. Yeah, I'm all on board with the value-based care stuff. I've been a fan since the beginning, since the about 2010. So,
And the
and
one state, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh yeah, I was saying, and seeing it change, right?
Yeah.
It's evolving and constantly evolving. So yeah, yeah.
They've done a meta-analysis around value-based care across the country in terms of state implementations and ACOs, and they found that the all-payer model that Maryland put into place had the best effect in terms of positive ROI. There was I'm trying to think back to the study that they did. I don't think that there were any other positive return on investments around all the value-based care models that they studied. And there was something, very unique that Maryland did. I looked into it when I saw the results, and they really, what they started with is they started by paying health systems regardless of the type of patient that they saw. It didn't matter what insurance that they had, they would pay them exactly the same amount for seeing any patient that came into their doors. And so that changed the thinking of the health systems to really collaborate with primary care, really collaborate with their communities to say, how can we really work together to keep folks out of the out of the hospital? What are we going to do 5 years before they come into the hospital, 10 years before they come into the hospital, and really, really create a community of care versus today we have a lot of siloed care because everyone has a different incentive. Hospitals want to see more patients. They get paid more if they go get, patients in beds. And the more people that come through their doors that go into the hospital they get paid more. Insurance companies get paid more for the sicker the patients are and the amount that they get from this value-based care coding, and so on and so forth. So the system's just very unaligned. There's incentives that create that, and we got to readjust that if we want to get to the value-based care model.
Yeah. Well, this is, I think, a really great note to end on. But and Jeremy, before I close up, do you have any more questions that are going to blow our minds?
I don't think so, no.
Nope, we got them all. Awesome. What's next for Mako? I mean, you talked about proactive, your relationship with them, but what's the next big thing for you?
It's it's really, as you mentioned, Heather, is showing how pharmacy can really change healthcare. The role of pharmacy in changing healthcare, changing not only costs, but also changing the quality of care and the outcomes that patients experience. And that's really what we're super excited about, with going forward with our merger with Proactive MD and how we can embed pharmacists into these clinics, provide the care that we know pharmacists and pharmacy teams are capable of providing on a consultative basis, agnostic to where the drug comes from. We're not there to just set up a pharmacy and get meds out. We're really there to help support the patients, the members, and the staff and the clinicians, with the expertise that we bring to the table. It's going to take all of us to change this very broken system for those that need it most, our patients. And so we're super excited about how we can really change how pharmacies perceive. We're sitting at tables today that we just never would have gotten the opportunity to before, just as Mako Rx. And so that's super exciting that people are listening and that people want to hear our input, and partly because it's become such a big issue and problem.
Yeah.
That does feel like a really cool mesh between the Proactive MD and the Mako RX too. Yeah, like they really seem like they're two links in a chain that will
That's
go
right.
very well together.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're part of the uprising, Jeremy.
Yeah, yeah. This is a very uprising
It
episode.
is.
Yeah,
This is why we're here. This is why
changing the game, man.
yeah.
Change the game for the better for everybody. That's kind of what we try to make every episode about here, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's what we're here for. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Before we let you go, though, how do we find you? If somebody is interested in working with Mako or Proactive or both of you or however you want to sell that one, where do they find you?
Multiple ways. You can go and search for Proactive MD. That's Proactive MD. And you can find the Proactive RX product or solution that we offer within them, on their website. You can reach out to their entire business development team. They can get you in touch with us or our products and services that we offer. You can go to Mako Rx, MakoRx.com. You can reach out to us there as well. Call us, or there's a get in touch with us form as well. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Vinay Patel, and connect with me. I'd love to connect with new people, share ideas, and again, figure out how everyone else is solving this problem so that we can work together.
Awesome.
I do have one more question,
Oh,
actually.
Jeremy, squeeze it in.
The name Mako RX,
Oh,
is that for the shark?
That
Is that
is the
actually named
shark.
for the
Yes.
shark? I was
The
hoping that was the
so
case.
we were, back in 2018, we were first acquired by a lab company, and they're huge. They're the fourth or fifth largest lab in the country, called Mako Medical. And the founder of that company wanted loved animals and wanted to have an image of a really nimble, sort of indomitable shark that exists in healthcare in the lab space when there were two giant whales that existed all at the time. And so they really wanted to be the nimble and sort of differentiator in the marketplace. So we took on, as we became the pharmacy solution, we took on that same model or logo and mascot. And so we're Mako Rx like the
Nice.
shark.
Nice. Love it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been the first of hopefully many conversations around the changing role and the value of pharmacy in our healthcare ecosystem and meeting with disruptors like you, changing the game. So,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Jeremy, Heather, it's been a great conversation. Haven't had one like this before, so it was really cool.
oh,
Oh, cool.
Talked about
that's a
so many different
win.
areas. Yes. I hope it provided value to you and your listeners. And again, if there's anything I can do to be a part of Healthcare Uprising, again, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to contribute as I can.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. And there you go, our conversation with Vinay Patel from both Mako RX and Proactive MD. Sounds like quite the combination coming at us there. But so let's start with what are our main points from that, Heather?
Well, first and foremost, yeah, we love a good disruptor on the healthcare uprising here. Mako RX doing that in the pharmacy space, I think, is really unique. You don't hear about, not to say it's not happening, but you definitely don't hear about pharmacy disruption very often. And I think the reason for that is because, like what he said, it's hard, right? There's a lot of factors that play in to cost and access and all the things and all the players and it's
Yeah,
this deep web of
because
people and
everybody's
things.
involved.
Yeah.
The companies are involved, and the drug makers are involved, and the insurance companies are involved, and the
Mhm.
government's involved. Like,
All the stakeholders
yeah, it's a
and
very complex web. It's all part of. Yeah.
yeah. So for them to be kind of, for them to be putting themselves in that, right? And to be kind of breaking into that space, I think is it's really exciting because the biggest thing about pharmacy or pharmaceuticals is cost, like all day long, right?
Yeah.
It's cost, cost, cost. And to come in to a really complicated, hard to disrupt section of the healthcare industry, um, that takes some cojones,
Mm.
as we say here in Arizona.
Yeah.
So,
It's I here's the stat that blew my mind. You ready? I even wrote it down for myself. Talking about something that needs to be disrupted, overly complex piece of the system. So only 1 to 3% of people take 100% of all those drugs that are constantly advertised on television,
specialty drugs.
specialty drugs,
Yep.
and they're advertised that widely for such a small group because they account for 60% of the pharmacy costs in these programs.
Yeah.
1 to 3% of people make up 60% of the cost on the, like, that alone to me is like, that's not right.
Hmm.
That's a broken system.
Yeah.
You
What's
know what I mean? And then he says, they get the name brand that's selling for 10 grand a dose.
oh
And then all of
yeah.
a sudden they finally let him come out with a generic and it's $50.
It's like, how do you go from that?
Like, why wasn't it $50 to begin with? Because it
Yeah.
could have been.
Yeah.
And there's still places that are trying to charge 10 grand for it
Yeah.
when you can get it for $50.
Yeah. The world of pharmaceuticals is one of the areas I know the least about, which I talked about during the interview, but and it's complicated. I mean, the healthcare industry itself is complicated, but just like the little corner of like pharmacy, well, it's like not even that little, it's pretty
Yeah.
big, but that part is just it's confusing. I wanted to like throw up the mind blown emoji
Yeah.
on the screen at one point where like that's how I feel most of the time. But I will say this though, as much as that's a problem, and everything with pharmacy is just super complicated. Um, the what they're doing with Proactive MD, what Mako RX is doing with Proactive MD, with creating this kind of access point that doesn't exist for employers by having these clinics, and then Mako coming in, serving up that pharmacy piece of
Right.
it.
And being able to have a pharmacy in with the clinic and it be a pharmacy with the cost plus concept behind it.
Right,
It's pretty
exactly.
brilliant.
And you need volume to change things in healthcare. Well, probably anywhere, honestly, in any industry for that matter. And so that's a really great way, I think, to create the volume in terms of the number of patients.
Right. It makes me think of Amazon, those Amazon warehouses,
Uh-huh.
which are such horrible places to work, but they take up so much space and they have these huge warehouses with a bunch of land around them. I've seen a
Uh-huh.
number of them throughout Arizona. There's totally room to build a clinic at each one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And then all those people who work at those places can at least get easy access to healthcare
Well,
because I mean, it's a big enough company. They got to be getting some kind of benefits, right?
Well, when you don't make it hard for them to have to take off work,
Exactly.
lose time, lose pay, blah, 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 all the things, you
Right.
put
They
the
could
clinic
just
right there.
make an appointment for half an hour before their shift
Hmm.
starts to go in and see the doctor real
Hmm.
quick. And then all they got to do is go to work like they normally do a little bit early and go
Hmm.
see the doctor and then go straight to work. They don't have to take any extra rides. They don't have to schedule any other extra time.
Yeah. You know what we need to do? We need to bring Proactive MD on the show now.
Specifically,
Yeah, and talk to them about what they're solving for. Because think about if you have the clinics for these large employers, you're then relieving some of the burden on the healthcare ecosystem like in the
right?
community.
The general system.
Because all those
Yeah.
people that are trying to get care, whether it be for a PCP or a pharmacy for that matter, now you're taking them out of that equation and you're putting them in their special little clinic that serves them, and therefore you're taking that additional burden away from the rest of the community
Right. And then
care.
the public places have more room for everybody else because you don't have all those people going there.
Exactly. So there you go. We just figured it out, guys. Mic drop. Boom.
And done. So if you like what you heard, way we solve problems on this podcast, make sure you hit the like and subscribe and all those other happy little fun buttons on whatever platform you're on. You know, ring a bell or maybe leave us a rating and review. That's always helpful to see how we're doing from the listener's point of view. We're on all the major listening platforms from Apple to Spotify, everything in between. We're on YouTube. We got a Patreon for as little as $1 a month. I don't know where else are we, Heather?
We're online, healthcareuprising.com. And also, we're on all the socials. You can find us on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky. We're posting out there all the time. You can hear when our episodes drop. You can hear or read stories from a lot of the folks that come on the show. But also, we would love to hear from you. If you're a founder or you represent a company that is doing something new, exciting, innovative, shaking trees, disrupting, we want to talk to you. So give us a shout at healthcareuprising@gmail.com. Also, for our Human Stories series, we love to bring on the real people out there going through all the things in their healthcare journeys. If you have a really interesting, not so good, not so amazing, but maybe great also ending.
The good and the
we
bad.
like
We
happy
like to
endings.
hear it all.
Give us a shout. Healthcareuprising@gmail.com. We'd love to have you on. So I think that is it for this dose of healthcare uprising today, my friend. Keep looking for the good in the world because sometimes it's where you least expect it.
This has been a Shut Up production.